And welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Larry and Spencer, and we're discussing Why Women Kill Season 2, Episode number 9, The Unguarded Moment. Please hit the sub button, hit the bell. We're very excited about doing the season finale review next week. A lot of other content coming up on the channel. Leave a comment, a like. That really helps push the video. And wow, I didn't see that ending coming. We're full spoilers, by the way. We're gonna jump right into the final moments of this episode. That being Catherine. Boy, I literally
Yeah,
did not see
damn.
this coming. I knew Spencer had texted me and talked to me that something tragic happened at the end, but I didn't know to this extent what it was going to be. We find
Yeah,
ourselves with.
Larry didn't watch through the fucking credits, so
Oh
when it
yeah,
turned it
we'll
on,
talk. We'll talk about that too. That was great. Because
Oh, you said there was something after the credits?
no, you left the Larry was you watched the app and it was in a position where Spencer saw the ending before.
Oh no, I didn't rewind or anything. I guess that's just where it started you.
He was very upset.
Well, y'all, to be fair,
It wasn't
on
me.
on your honor, one of y'all did that to me every episode. I'd see the ending. I'd see whatever twist was happening.
it was probably Karma. It was probably me. I watched that shit. It was airing.
I always let the credits run through. Just saying. But yes, Catherine. She ends up getting very frustrated because Scooter is there with Rita and he's helping her, and we'll get into sort of Rita here in a moment. But Catherine pulls her gun out, unloads, shoots Scooter in the chest, and then the one bullet finds its way to sad, depressed Bertram. And I'm assuming he's dead. That's my assumption, at least. Scooter, I'm not sure yet, but I think this is how Bertram's written out. Do you guys agree? How shocked were you by the ending? What does this mean for Catherine? Is she going to get locked up for this? There's only one episode left. Hell of an ending. Yeah.
I think they could. I mean, there's lots of ways they could do it, but with only one episode left, I think that's probably how Bertram's written out. But it's I think Alma. For a second, I couldn't remember her name. I think Alma's going to blame Rita for this. So although their big rivalry showdown's been written and it's been coming, I think that this is going to push it a lot further along, because with everything that happened, how is Alma not going to blame Rita? Rita was right there. Like, Scooter took a bullet for her, but the bullet that was meant for her, well, the second bullet, I guess, that was meant for her struck, Bertram. And with Vern uncovering everything, basically implicating Bertram, is she going to feel that maybe Catherine did it on purpose because she knows that he killed his... there's a lot of little things that could be kind of spun into the story, but I think that the focus is just going to be Rita and Alma going toe to toe.
And I don't know that that's going to be it. Because there's one factor that this whole thing really depends on, and that's whether or not Alma really cares about Bertram at all at this point.
Oh no, I don't think it does, but I think this is her way of getting back at Rita, because she's going to blame her, and now she's also her competition coming back into the fold.
Well, yeah, she may take a jab at her if she sees this as a way for Rita or even Catherine if she sees it as them coming at her in some way, but she may just look at it as an out, and this may be the reason we saw that ex-boyfriend earlier in the series. She might start dating that dude again, and it may be, Dee pushing Vern further in the investigation because, her father's dead and Alma seems just fine. In fact, almost elated about it. So it may be the thing that really trips her up.
Now that you mention that, because this episode started, it said 3 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
So
will there be a time jump?
Yeah, I think now that you mention that, Larry, that would make sense for them to do a time jump again, and then you kind of have Vern going a little bit further into the investigation, kind of catching up with him realizing that Alma was also in. They could jump ahead because they planted enough seeds where it wouldn't be awful, like it wouldn't feel unexplained. And then that boyfriend scene, like nothing's been a throwaway scene. So for them not to mention him again, I think that you may be right, especially on that point, because him hopping back in. But like I said, because of the Garden Club, whether she really feels that way or not, I think publicly she's going to mourn the loss of her husband.
Absolutely. In fact, those things will play into each other because Bertram, remember, Bertram borrowed that money from him in order to help out with their situation and everything. And likely he'd show up at the funeral and Alma will appear to be mourning. And, you know, at the same time, she'll be making moves at him, potentially at the funeral. And that'd be real messed up. And, you know, like Dee's going to catch on to that, you know, and we'll go from there. And that'll be, you know, Dee will probably may start her own little investigation, or she'll push Vern to investigate further.
Well, speaking of sort of Alma's plot line, I mean, this episode was her going to the extreme of just being a mean person and not caring, being, you know, plotting. You know, we finally, yes, the Grace thing absolutely played a big role into the plot. We finally find out what that was. We get a little bit more with Joan, and we find out that Joan and Grace are the ones having the affair. They want to keep it a secret, and Alma uses this against them in order to become president of the Garden Club. Now, the interesting thing about it, specifically for me at least, was the Grace, because we've seen Joan be pretty ferocious and brutal to everyone. There's a scene with Rita that's just horrible. Now, we know Rita was holding that over their heads as well, but it's a pretty cruel scene. And then we see how Joan talks to even Alma, you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, look, you're beneath us," you know. So, but Grace, I bring this up because Grace has been nice all the way through the entire series. In fact, I can't recall any time she's done anything where I would say, wow, that was really screwed up. And we get the shot of her, you know, crying at the end, seeing Alma and realizing what Alma is now. And so Grace is the one, and it does affect Alma. You know, Alma, when she comes home, she's upset. And then on top of that, we have the, you know, revelation that Vern has figured things out. So I'm not completely sure where Alma's head's going to be going into the next episode.
I think that's a good point, because when you look at, if Alma wasn't affected at the end of it, I would really question what was going to happen at that point, because she may have turned full-blown villain, but this shows that it still affects her. So with her being affected by it, I think the big thing is how they're going to push the story forward as far as that affecting her. Is that going to be the thing that changes her back to what she was beforehand, or is it just going to be that final nail in the coffin where she finally is just like, oh, fuck it, I'll do whatever I need to, and then show the real person she has become? Because she wasn't this person the whole time. She was ambitious the whole time, but, you know, from the jump, she just wanted to fit in. She just wanted to be a part. She was sitting at home. She really loved flowers, but she wanted to be a part of this club. And she kept being made to feel pushed out. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. And now she gets the one to determine who's good enough and not good enough. And I think that that's already gone to her head. So I'm curious to see if she's going to have like a relapse to being good again because of the gray stuff, or if this is just that final, that's behind me now kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think whether or not this is her just, you know, jumping that one last hurdle, because she's destroyed what seems like it is what seems like is her only actual friendship in the show in order for power. And, you know, now that Bertram's gone and everything, it may be like, well, what do I have left to hold me back? Or this may be her turning point. But I feel like she's going to double down. I just have a really strong feeling about that.
Well, it's possible, definitely, because we get a scene with Rita is torn down this entire episode. She has been for the last couple, and we have her, you know, self-reflecting, and we get the scene with her and Scooter, where she basically is like, "Look, I've been a complete horrible person. These are the reasons. This is my background. This is what I learned when I was locked up." Now, whether or not she was bullshitting him or not, I don't know, but it seemed pretty genuine in the performance. And we, Spencer or you or Larry, one of you were talking about how this could be, at least in the last couple episodes, leading to sort of a Rita redemption story. And it felt very much like that in this episode. And if that is truly the case, if it is a Rita redemption, then you would assume that the antagonist is now Alma. And how does that resolve between those two? Now, Catherine's also in the corner of the story, and she's definitely a villain at this point. What happens to her? I don't know. Does she run back to Texas? Does she get arrested? That not sure. Does she pay everyone off that witnessed it? Who knows?
Now, I don't know that Catherine's evil, because when I look at that, like,
I'm not saying she's evil, but she's
yeah.
a villain. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily call her a villain.
Because, well, I look at it like
shooting innocent, unarmed people in the street. That's not a villain.
Not if she didn't do it on purpose. That's not a villainous act. That's a horrible mistake, but that's not an act of villain. She didn't
shooting Scooter was not a villainous thing.
She wasn't trying to.
She was trying to shoot Rita.
Yeah, she was trying to shoot Rita, and she sees Rita as an evil person that manipulated these things, that killed her father. It was an act of vengeance, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily make her a villain. Just a very hurt person, because she didn't do this, out of an act of. Well, she does have malicious intent.
So the entire episode, yeah, she was completely a saint and didn't plot against.
Well, that's very black and white to say saint or villain. There is an in between there, and it's like, this wasn't an evil plot. This was a hurt woman, lashing out.
I don't think that she's a good person. She knew what Scooter was several episodes ago and still let him be her gigolo. I think that she was a very privileged woman who was treated like crap by her dad. She was, manipulated by Rita. I think that I don't think that she's a good person by any means. She's not I don't think she's the protagonist, but I don't think that I think she's a not good person. But when I think I think that what you're saying is that what she's doing is hurting innocent people. Oh shit. Like the Joan and Grace stuff, because we were mentioning that right before the going into Catherine. That's obviously that Grace now sees Alma as this awful human being. But I'm curious, because as fiery as Joan is, if she's going to help undo Alma, or if it's basically just going to be Grace taking that step forward. Because we did talk about too that this is kind of that last hurdle for Alma, or is it going to show her kind of crack under the pressure of being this awful human being?
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Larry.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, it's such a big thing to ruin, and I wonder if we'll get any more of Grace's POV in the show at all. Whether this relationship will affect things, or if Grace will be the one to reveal a lot of things to Vern, the family heirloom, and that'll kick off the investigation. Whether she's just tearfully talking about it, and Vern pieces that together. Wait a minute, Alma had this thing, Alma had that thing. This goes deeper than I think. At the very least, she knew about what's going on.
Exactly. And as far, there's only one episode left. And as far as the Garden Club, which has been one of the, main, at least it's all Alma's motivation. Joan and Grace now, I do think it's going to play a factor in some way in this finale. I'm not sure how. Going back to the earlier thing, do you guys think Scooter survives?
It's gotten so weird. It's hard to say at this point. I thought Scooter was gonna get out of this whole thing, scot-free and consequence-free. He may actually, Catherine may have caused the opposite of what she intended. He may wind up, running away with Rita. Rita, gotta ruin her name. Rita, and now that she seems to be more herself than ever, and he still seems to like her.
Well, and I think too, you look at what happened between their relationships, and now Scooter. Now does Rita stand to inherit everything? Because remember, the only person that knew that stuff was the butler and Catherine. All the stuff about the old husband, where she was still married, and all this stuff. That's not public knowledge. Now, I am curious, because I don't remember hearing it, if Catherine said, my lawyer already knows this stuff, or if she was basically just blackmailing her. Because if nobody else knows this information, Rita's still going to get all the money. She's going to walk back into her life. Because either going to get arrested or go on the run. One of the two.
What do you think about the guy? I wrote it down. I'm glad I wrote it down because it happens. It's quick, and they never revisit the guy that took the cup. Like, we know there's some investigations going on. We know there's detectives. We know Catherine's hiring people. But what the hell? Dee has a, she's sitting there with Bertram. She goes to the bar, talks to the bartender, sets down a cup. A guy just grabs that shit, puts it in his pocket, walks out. I'm like, who does he work for? Why did he get the cup? What's he, DNA evidence, fingerprints? What, I was expecting something else later in the episode, but we never got it.
Yeah, wasn't that Vern's friend?
Yeah, that was the detective. But when you said DNA evidence, it made me laugh because I was like, that would be fucking fantastic if this was like an unsolved murder case until like they just fast forward to like the 90s. They're like, holy shit, he's been dead for 40 years, but we did find out that it was him that did it. Like, we can now finally rest in peace. The murder is solved. That would be fucking great. But I did, man, I was, the fact that he saw the first woman we saw him kill, the fact that he, really cared for her. That was such an odd scene, but it was, I think, revealing to the character himself that not only was he having a nervous breakdown, but it's just, he's not a good guy, but he's fucked up in the head. Like, something is wrong with him to think what he was doing was okay. But, and I love him.
Oh yeah.
But like, something was not physically, mentally wrong with him to feel justified in doing what he did. And the fact that he was, and it wasn't even guilt. Like, it would have been different had, and I don't remember the character's name, the ghost that he was talking to was talking to him, and he was like, I'm really sorry I killed you, blah, blah. That's not what happened at all. Like, they were just having a casual conversation, shooting the shit. And it showed to me more how unhinged Bertram was, that he felt like there was no guilt. Like, he had zero guilt about what he did until this last one when he started helping Alma. He had zero problem killing people. He had a lot of problems because I think he knows that Alma's intentions weren't the same as his. It doesn't mean that his were justified or better, but they don't have the same reason for killing.
Yeah, and that tells me that Bertram is farther gone than we thought, because, the fact that he was not only hallucinating, and I thought he was imagining, because, just imagining a conversation with her and everything, but then he was worried about his daughter actually seeing her. So, maybe Bertram was even crazier than we thought, even though, we already knew he wasn't 100% sane, because, he's murdering people.
Yeah, definitely. That whole scene, told me Bertram is gone. And it's interesting that it was her that he was having the drink with, but I kept wondering if they were going to do anything with his mother. If that's someone whoever he thinks he's communicating with or anything.
I love the way they play with that scene, because first you hear him talking and he's in a bar and he's having drinks. So I don't know about y'all, but my first assumption was that he was talking to his priest.
Same. At the very, because I thought they were gonna cut to the priest and he was gonna be just pounding back drinks and just like, oh god. So yeah, I thought that's how they were framing it.
Yeah.
So Alma completely lies to Dee about Miss Yost. Creates her own, story of what happened. The only thing that was accurate was the fall and the garden shears. But now that Vern is been figuring things out, what happened? That's the big also thing what happens, especially if Bertram is dead. Now does Vern just let it go? Is he going to tell Dee? How does Dee and Alma work through this? Dee, will she find out the truth?
Well, at this point, unless Alma tells her, or unless Vern figures it out, who's going to tell her? Because Birdie's dead, and he already agreed to just kind of like let it go. He's just like, yeah, whatever. But to me, it's painting Bertram, who is now dead, in this awful light. So to me, it's more of a revelation of Alma's character. That is she going to come clean? Because if she doesn't, we've already talked about her, screwing Grace over. Like that was the last hurdle. But I think thinking about it now, this is another. Her dad's dead, and Dee looks at her dad as this guy who was having an affair and killed somebody. Like so is she going to rectify that? Is she just going to basically come clean and be like, look, it was an accident. She was sitting by the window and she fell out the window on some gardening shears. And you know what? I really want to be part of this garden club. And that wouldn't have happened if they knew that we were responsible or even involved in some kind of accidental death. That would have been too much scandal. But now it's almost too late. Like she can't come back and be like, you know what, Dee? I lied to you about your dad. He was really a weird guy, but he killed a bunch of other people, but it wasn't her that he killed. Like I just don't know what Alma's game plan is, because I think that part of the story is almost not irrelevant, but to me, it's a character building moment for Alma, good or bad character building. Like it's going to build her in a positive or negative light.
Yeah, and I think they could have, she could have been honest with Dee to a degree, like you said, and Dee may have accepted that because this is the one death in the show that was an accident. She could have said it was an accident. It looked really bad, like you're saying, and she didn't even have to go into her selfish motivations about it. She could have just said it was an accident. It looked like we killed her. We panicked, and we did that. Now it really looks like we killed her, Dee. We didn't want to ruin our lives. We're sorry. And Dee may have let it go without her building this whole complicated thing the way that Alma does. But I think I think what's really going to get her, I think it's just going to be her reaction to Bertram's death, because I think she's going to have that lizard person-like response that she had to Mrs. Yost's death, and Dee's not exactly dumb, so Dee's gonna catch on that something's off, that her story didn't check out now, that this is about protecting her father.
Yeah, his death will definitely will shake things up for both characters, and also Vern. What's Vern gonna do? But yeah, there's only one episode left. I'm assuming it's the typical 45-50 minute length. Any other thoughts on where this is headed or this particular episode?
I don't have any specific thoughts. I think Pacific. I don't have any thoughts about the ocean.
Pacific.
I don't ever think about the ocean.
But I mean, you've been landlocked in the East Coast your whole life. I mean, it makes sense.
I'm too far away from the water. I think that I don't have any specific things about where this is going, only because, well, we already talked about it a bunch, but I think that there's been enough twists. The biggest thing I question is like what we talked about earlier is the old boyfriend coming back, because I think that would be a really cool little twist to throw in at the end. But I am curious as to what the time constraint is. I was getting ready to look it up and see if they posted it, just because I want to know whether or not it's going to try to jam everything in 50 minutes or if they're going to extend it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, because there's a lot of loose threads, so I'm very curious what we're going to get. Is Rita just completely back to being herself and no longer pretending to be this person? And I think that's the case, because it seems like, I don't know if y'all caught this, but it seems like when she was talking to Scooter that, the accent that she's been using this whole time, that's faded, and she's back to sort of a hybrid between that and her old Texas accent, and so I think she's kind of herself now. And, what becomes of her and Scooter is what I'm most curious about, because I feel like I've got a sort of decent idea where everybody else is going to wind up, but not really them.
Yeah,
IMDb doesn't list the runtime for the last episode.
Does it have the last season? That's what you're looking for?
No,
season one's finale.
That's a good point. Just go back to last season and see.
Yeah, and I'm glad y'all mentioned last season too, because that's another thing I'm curious about.
It was right at an hour as opposed to the other ones, which were like 50 minutes.
Oh,
so it was a little bit longer, but not a lot.
Extra 10 minutes probably. I think I think they. I mean, it's the writing's been so tight, so yeah, I think they'll be able to wrap it up. But yeah, very much enjoying it. Very much looking forward to the finale. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just since we
Uh-huh.
didn't see season 1, I'm just curious, like well, I'm curious about how this ends, because like much like Fargo, there's so many seasons of Fargo, you have an idea of how this ends, that it's not going to be a completely happy ending. We never saw season 1. We don't know if there's a specific set tone that they like to create for this show season to season. So
That's true.
I'm just
Yeah,
curious how it ends.
does everything? Yeah, that's a great point because that might be a hint as to what happens in this, how the first one ends. But yeah, we will definitely be doing that review. Very excited about it. Like I said, some more content coming to the channel. There's a lot of stuff dropping in August, and a hell of a lot of stuff coming back in September. So look out for that, and we will see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.